Hi, I'm Anna of All Trades, and today I'm working with Rockler Woodworking and Bench Dog Hand Planes to build a whiskey cabinet, and I am so excited to take you along on the journey. Let's get started.
I get my hands dirty, they show me no mercy, so I just keep working.
You'll notice that I have all my wood cut and stacked up here. I'm using a little weight and some stickers between because I've just cut the lumber and I don't want it to move a whole bunch before we get started cutting the joinery. I also have a practice joint just to make sure that I have my head around all of the different joinery options that we're going to be doing on here. This build will be featuring a sliding dovetail in the shelf that has a little stopped area there so that it can give us a little grace as far as the shoulder goes, and then of course dovetails here. But there is one little tricky dovetail on the back because it is encasing the rabbeted back, which will allow for nailed in slats to make up the back of the cabinet. So once I have selected the grain pattern that I want to use for this build, we need to start cutting the joinery for the cabinet to be put together. The first step is going to be cutting these rabbets on the router table, and then we will also use the router table to cut the sliding dovetail portion. All right, so now I am all set up to cut my tails, which are the first thing that I cut when I cut dovetails. And I want to, before I start cutting, mark out all my wastes. Anything you can remove at the coping size, time that you'll save with the chisel later, so. On the pin board, because these are compound angles, I want to make sure to transfer the marks with the marking knife to the back of the board, which will allow me to pare back to the lines should I need to. So when it comes time to do the door assembly, we're getting ready to cut the dados, and so I wanted to orient everything before I cut it on the saw so that it is always cutting on the same side of the door piece. So if there is any variation one way or another with the blade, we're gonna have it all be exactly the same, offset in the exact same direction, so there's nothing all wonky when we go to put it together. Okay, so now we're going to cut the tenons for the rails, which means we are going to use the dado stack. We're going to make a pass here, and then alternatively on the other side, and then we are going to move the fence out of the way and cut it a little deeper so it can close up that mortise. So it is time to sort the back of the cabinet, and because of wood movement issues, we're going to want to make sure we have something that kind of can flow freely. So to that end, I've actually just done rabbets on both sides of these. We're going to repeat that process on this board to fit under there, and then it will be nailed to the back of the cabinet, which will allow for a little bit of expansion and contraction. We will also put these about a dime space apart. That will give the wood a little bit of extra room to expand and contract, and then the whole back of the cabinet won't explode during the wettest part of the winter. Little safety thing here, because we're using the dado stack, we don't have the riving knife installed, so kickback is definitely an issue. You want to make sure that you're pushing this up to the fence, for blade contact, but you also want to make sure that you're holding it all the way down so there's no opportunity for it to lift up and kick back. However, back here, I'm actually not going to push down on it until the entire piece is on the table of the table saw. So at this point, all of the joinery has been cut. Everything is ready for final checking and assembly, save for one thing, and that's these weird little notchy things. I have already roughed them in, but at this point, I finally was able to dry fit the dovetails enough that I could get the exact measurement for where this little piece needs to sit. So I now am going to precisely cut each of these little notches out to their final height so that when I put this all together, everything's going to seat together nicely. Once the dovetails are all fit together, it's time to start thinking about all the rest of the joinery. We need to fit the panel into the groove cut in the rails and stiles for the door. We need to take that final measurement for the sliding dovetail shelf, and we need to make sure that the rails and stiles actually all fit together. So at this point, we are going to use hand tools to refine the joinery that we cut with power tools. First things first, we fit the panel into the groove, and we basically want a loose enough to expand and contract, but tight enough that it's gonna hold itself securely fit. And I just had a little scrap of this, and so that conveniently fit in the bench. So as I was planing things away, I could check and make sure that it fit on both sides. Next up, we need to refine the joinery that we cut for the rails and stiles on the table saw. And a quick word about this here is that generally speaking, you would use what's called a haunched mortise and tenon, which is what this is for this joint. However, for the sake of expediency on this project, and also because this is such a tiny, lightweight door, these this tongue and groove joint is going to suffice just fine. If you're in any way worried about the strength of this joint, you can incorporate your own haunch tenon style, or you can actually just drill in dowels here or use a domino or anything to add strength. But I am very confident that with such a small door, with such lightweight wood, this is going to last 100 years, no problem. We are finally ready for glue up, which means that it is time to pre-finish all of the things that could potentially get glue on them during the glue up, because that would affect our finishing process. So because I'm using shellac, I'm currently straining that out and getting ready to put that right onto these pieces. So at this point, it is really starting to look like a whiskey cabinet, and this is the very exciting part, but it's also a little misleading because there are still so many details that need to be thought through and done up after the glue up. We need to fit the back slats, we need to attach the French cleat, we need to space the back slats perfectly, we need to continue the finishing process, we need to remove any glue or finishing stains that happen during the whole glue up process, and then we need to mortise in the hinges and finish fitting the door. So, looks like a cabinet, and it soon will be a cabinet, but we've just got some work to do first. I'm always extremely nervous about using routers this late in a project because they can just grab and mess things up in a real hurry. But this is a huge time saver and will give us a degree of accuracy that I can really appreciate, and so it's worth taking the time to practice a little bit. So it's now time to put the door on. I want the reveal to be the same all the way around here. The moment of truth. Oh, look at that. And so after paying a little too much attention, after a few too many details, this is finally finished. But on a piece like this, when I've spent so much time and effort putting it together, I really am happy that I took the extra time to do the things that I wanted to do to make this piece truly great. First, the continuous grain of the elder runs around the entire piece. There are some very intentionally placed pieces of spalting that just give it some details that really bring in the different colors of the woods. This is one detail that I know is there, but you can't even really see it due to the fact that it's end grain and the shellac really got soaked up at that thirsty end grain. But here there is heartwood and sapwood, and so here I selected this piece and turned it in such a way that the heartwood and sapwood also matches right there. I just absolutely love the way these weird dovetails that gave me so much trouble turned out. I love that the reveal of the back slats is exactly the same throughout the entirety of the piece. I love that the screws are all clocked the same direction, even the ones on the French cleat in the back, which will never be seen. I love that the strange inclusion that's on the top of the chest is also repeated directly below it on the shelf. I love how tight the tongue and groove is on the door. And just for kicks and giggles, before I assembled the case, I put the door on my table saw and tested to see if it had any wobble or racking whatsoever, and it was dead flat, which is super, super hard to achieve with these tongues and grooves. I really, really love the 1/8 inch reveal around the entire door front here, that it's inset by 1/8 of an inch, and also because I'm not a huge fan of door catches, I love that the door sits perfectly there. Also that the reveal around the door is the same all around, minus of course this little gap for the hinges there. And then the last thing that I love is the way this shellac made these dovetails pop. I am so, so pleased with the entire aesthetic of the cabinet. It is really awesome, and I'm so excited to have it in my house for many, many years to come. Now, far be it from me to say that this piece is absolutely perfect. There are certainly a few gaps in the dovetails. There's a spot where, on this back piece here, where I accidentally overcut the line, forgetting that I was going to leave this little larger pin there. And there's all kinds of other things that are just, you know, not perfect about it. But the thing is that I did my absolute best on it. I'm so pleased with how it came out. And as Adam reminds me over and over and over again, as long as I don't point out the errors, very few people will ever see them. But lest you think that I'm trying to show off an absolutely perfect piece, certainly is not that. But dang, am I happy about it. So thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video, for supporting my channel in that way. I hope you leave this video feeling challenged, inspired, and excited to get outside and to make things with your own hands as well. Cheers.